Hey everybody, welcome back to Community Group Curriculum this week. I hope that you've had an awesome week so far and that really these relationships of the people that are around you are really pouring into helping disciple you to be closer and more in love with Jesus. That's what this is all about. This last Sunday we were in the Gospel of Matthew for the second week back after the Problem of God series. And then what we did was we talked about chapter 22 verses 1 to 14. But before we get into those questions, we have a good chunk of them for you. I really want to bring up the Village 2021 campaign. This is such a huge step and opportunity for our church, but also for our nation as we seek to develop this $10 million piece of land into a huge event center that we can actually use for conferences and training and to send out church planters and church plants and really help reach our nation with the gospel of who Jesus is, what he accomplished on the cross, and what it means for people's lives today and forever. So we want to be involved as a church. That's really our heartbeat, to see people come and be transformed into fully devoted followers of Jesus, not just in the Lower Mainland and not just in Calgary, but across this nation. So we were told and given updates on numbers, and we saw that there's a lot of people who still haven't taken that opportunity to pledge money towards this campaign, to really put their money where their mouth is, to say, yeah, I love Jesus, I love the mission that Village is on, to see Jesus proclaimed and have people fall in love with him, but how can we play a part in that? Well, even in our groups, if you look around, only 33% of our group members have actually taken a step to pledge towards this campaign. So I just want to encourage you, if you haven't, if you have questions, we're going to give you a chance to talk about that today as a group, to kind of talk through what does it look like, hey, what's happened, how's it been for other people making those decisions, how can you be involved? Maybe you just need to be reminded. But let's take some time to listen to how Mark actually summed it up, where the numbers are at, what we heard. Let's do that right now, and then we'll get back to discussing it as a group.
So Village 2021 is our project. For those of you who are new, we're raising $10 million in order to get land. The land is about 5 minutes from here, and ultimately what we want to do is be in our own building by 2021, which obviously in a culture like ours costs money. So we've squared away the land, but we need to be able to raise $10 million to actually close the land and get it by February 28th. So we started a campaign a couple months ago to raise $10 million. We asked you guys to pledge. You guys pledged and have pledged so far 6.2 million of the 10 million, which is awesome. Praise God. Thank you for that. Super generous. That's amazing. But we still have $4 million to get pledged. Now, two things. First, a pledge actually isn't money. And so my hope is if you actually pledged it, you can start giving it now. Make sure you 100% give it by February 28th, because we need all of you. Don't pledge it unless you can give it. But please, those of you who did pledge it, make sure you actually do give it and you didn't just feel pressure at a moment ago, because there's a lot of planning that goes around these pledges. So we've pledged 6.2 million. Awesome. We've had people, amazing stories, youth that set aside 20% of the money that they raised, making a minimum wage at a job for their college fund, and they gave it to this. People who said, hey, we were going to do this, and then we worked some stuff out, and we realized we don't need RSP stuff, so we gave those stocks. People who sold condos and gave the money, a couple $1 million gifts out of that 6.2, a $500,000 gift, multiple $250,000 gifts. People are giving. People are being generous because their hearts have been stirred by the gospel to be generous. Now, here's the thing. Only 42% of people that we estimated are going to give to this have actually pledged yet. Now, I know December, kind of year end, some of you guys are figuring out, okay, I needed to wait to this and then figure that out. Awesome, I get that, but we need the rest of you to actually pledge. We need that 42, because what we want, even more important than the money, is the participation. Because here's the principle of the Bible. You read 2 Corinthians 8, Paul says, hey, if you benefit from a pastor teaching you, make sure that pastor gets money, right? That's the whole idea of 2 Corinthians 8. You don't freeload in the context of the kingdom. And so if I was to ask you right now, when we build this awesome building that's going to be awesome for youth group and women's stuff and church planning and Sundays and cafe and all this kind of stuff, when we build that, how many of you are going to go? How many of you are actually going to show up? And if I got you to raise your hands, if you weren't liars to the core of your being, all of you would raise your hands and go, yeah, I ain't going to keep showing up here. When no one's here, I'm going to show up at the new place where we're doing church, and we're going to reach people in the next 2 decades. All right, well, you can't do that and not pay for it. That's not the way this works. You can't let other people pay for your benefit. So the issue is, God doesn't care so much about the amount, it's the sacrifice. We want everybody giving to this. We want that 42% participation to actually raise up to higher than that. And so we need a lot of you to actually pledge. So about 700 units have pledged and told us how much they're going to give. That's awesome. We factored in about 1,700. So we need 1,000 of you to think, pray, make sure that you know, and actually tell us. Go online, Village 2021, get a card, talk to the Connect desk, whatever you do. But we need to know in the next couple of weeks, we need you guys to actually say, here's how much I'm going to give to this. Because really it's all about, listen, this is about God giving all of us an opportunity to participate in this. And you go through any gospel, Jesus talks about money all the time. And he says, where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. And if your heart is in mission, if your heart is actually reaching people for Jesus, then your money has to follow. You read Luke 16, Jesus is all about the reality of, hey, where your money goes, that there's going to be treasure that you don't really understand spiritual life and reward in heaven if you don't follow discipleship and follow Jesus with your money. If you just follow him with the songs that you sing and the time that you give to things, and you don't say, actually, I need to prioritize my money around things of the kingdom, then you don't understand what Jesus is calling you to in life. It has to follow. And so the call for us is to 100% of us need to participate in this at whatever level. If all you can afford is $2,000, awesome, we'll take $1,500. That student, he like worked out his life. He's like, I'm gonna sacrifice 20% of my college fund. He's giving $1,500. And then he saw the 6.2 and he was like, awesome, but kind of discouraged actually, because where's the rest of it? I thought these people actually had jobs. And so we wanna make sure that we dig deep and we ask God, what are you actually calling us to do? And that we all participate in this, all right? Love you. Please do that in the next couple weeks. Thanks. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
So take some time right now as a group just to discuss the ins and outs of Village 2021. Maybe you have some questions, maybe you have some comments, maybe you have just need to help understand what's going on with it all. Well, we're excited about that. And hopefully you got a pledge card on Sunday, and we're really looking forward to seeing this be a new expression, another expression of God's grace and gospel in our lives, so we might be generous with what we have, not just in this circumstance, but our hearts would build to be generous just throughout all of life. That's something we truly want. So we're looking forward to that. And so let's discuss kind of what that means, Village 2021, if you have questions as groups right now. Back when I was in university at the University of Manitoba, I took this economics course, and in this course, I was taught, and this is mind-blowing, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. And what that means is that there is somebody along the line has to pay for every single aspect of that lunch. And really, when we talk about the forgiveness of God, the grace of God, the triumph over sin in our lives, it's really no different. That there is no such thing as a free lunch in regards to our sin. That God didn't actually just freely give it to us, which he gave it to us, but it cost him something. It wasn't free for him. That his son was actually sacrificed for the sake of our sins. That God sent his son, Jesus, to come to earth, to die on a cross, to raise again 3 days later, and to pay for our sin fully, but to pay for it. And if you've been a Christian for any length of time, that might sound elementary to you. You'd be like, man, I know the story. But when you really let it hit your heart and really filter your life through it, you start to realize how many times maybe you in your life have taken advantage of the fact that God has freely given you the grace he has. That you have times in your life where you've chosen, or maybe you've fallen into sin, or maybe you've jumped in with 2 feet to choose whatever sin it might be. There's tons of them out there. Any moment that you've chosen to put something else as a priority in your life, to put something else in authority and kingship in your life over God himself. And in those moments, what we're doing is we're choosing sin over God, that our souls are really waging war against God as we say, I know what you want from me, God. I know you say that you have the best for me, but I'm going to choose this instead. And if we're honest with each other, then there's been times in all of our lives where we've done that. And we need to consistently be reminded that God's gift of grace wasn't free to him, that it was costly, and that we need to be able to really function and live in a way that understands and acknowledges that weight, and then actually puts it on ourselves to say, wow, from that gift, I'm going to live in a way that honors that gift, that honors God, that's faithful to him. So really, I mean, all of that takes a practical outpouring of what you've learned. So what are ways, discuss as a group, ways that you can practically live in a way that honors that you can practically live in a way that sees the grace that God has given you as costly to him, and that you wouldn't live in a way that just completely takes it for granted. So let's discuss that right now. What are practical, real, hands and feet on the ground ways? Maybe it's accountability, maybe it's further conversation. Maybe it's repenting and giving something up, asking for forgiveness or forgiving others. But let's talk about all these things as a group right now. If you're anything like me, you've been given lots of opportunities in relationship and in life to actually talk about Jesus in a really open and explicit way. And if you're anything like me, you've taken some of those opportunities and completely squandered them, or you've said the wrong thing, or you didn't say anything at all. I mean, because for whatever reason, it could be a lack of confidence in what you know. It could be a fear of how that person's going to respond. It could be, I just want to keep this relationship and hopefully can show Jesus them through how I love them and not just speaking it. Well, there's two verses that you're going to read that one of them almost assumes that as a priesthood, we're going to be able to do that well because that's who we are in Jesus. And the other one talks about being able to preach the gospel verbally to people so that they might actually hear it, so that the importance of that. But both of those steps take an equipped people. People who are confident in what they know about Jesus, confident in their own story, and confident to actually share that with other people. I mean, maybe you've had it where you're in a conversation with somebody and there's this moment where you actually feel like the Spirit is like, I am setting you up to hit a home run with this person. Like, this is the opportunity you can have to share me with them. And then there's times where you just don't, where you avoid it, where you change the subject, and when you leave that conversation, you're almost kicking yourself for just letting it go. I've been there. So let's take some time now, because what I've found in my life that helps me in that is to actually identify places that I can continue to grow, to build my confidence. And sometimes that means just like promising to yourself and to the people around you that you're just going to try. That like when you have a conversation with somebody and when that opportunity is there, just tell your group, like, okay, I'm just going to jump in and see what happens. I mean, and it's in those moments where you don't feel as equipped maybe as you think you should be, and you step out in faith and you start talking about Jesus, and you realize that your story really does actually relate in a beautiful way, and that conversation goes two ways, and that you can have a good conversation with someone about Jesus without making it awkward or without putting yourself in a weird position, but to really just be honest about what you know and what you don't, to really be sure about your faith and how you can talk about it, to be really clear and articulate on the gospel message of who Jesus is and what he accomplished on the cross. Well, let's talk about all those things as a group right now. How can you, maybe what has historically stopped you from sharing the gospel with other people in the past? Share some of those stories, but also how can you be better equipped, and what can you do? What steps can you take to be better equipped to share the gospel with others? Let's talk about that now as groups.